to move on to Mike McCabe. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thank you, everybody. Look, we live in troubled times. We live in fouled up times. We live in downright dangerous times. But it is not nearly enough to offer resistance. It is not nearly enough to be the resistance. It's not enough to be against Donald Trump or against Scott Walker. It's not enough to tell people what is wrong with Scott Walker and what is wrong with Donald Trump. That won't get us out of the mess that we're in. We have to let people know what Wisconsin and what America have the potential to become and how we reach that potential. We have to offer vision and ideas and energy and passion. We have to let people know that there's a better way. Because simply telling people what is wrong with Scott Walker or what is wrong with Donald Trump will lead to more years of their rule. We've had 3 elections for governor. It's become perfectly clear what Scott Walker can overcome. He can overcome a not Walker campaign. He can overcome people being told repeatedly what's wrong with him and what's wrong with his leadership. We have to make the people of Wisconsin a much, much better offer than they've been made in a very long time. I'm probably like a lot of you. I look at Wisconsin and sometimes I have a hard time recognizing this as the state where I grew up. In so many ways, Wisconsin has lost its way and is becoming a shadow of its former self. And I do look at our state sometimes and I think, how did we get here? And is this the place that I grew up knowing all those years? This is a state that was known from coast to coast as a beacon of clean and open and honest government. And we've watched our political culture grow poisoned, and we've watched corruption seep into our government. This was a state that was an industrial powerhouse. And now we're leading the nation in shrinkage of the middle class. And our poverty rate has reached its highest level in 30 years. And economic inequality is at its highest level in Wisconsin since the Great Depression. And it's not enough to say what's wrong with Scott Walker's management of our economy, what's wrong with his leadership. We have to tell Wisconsin that we can do an about-face about the whole way we approach building a sturdy economy. That instead of feeding the rich, instead of showering tax breaks and state subsidies on a few thousand people, or 1 or 2 huge corporations, or one global conglomerate from Taiwan, we can take our $3 billion and we can take more than that and we can invest it in empowering 5 million people in this state. It has to be Wisconsin's goal to have living wages for every worker. And when I hear even Democrats say that, well, maybe the best we could do is $10 an hour, maybe that's reasonable. Go out and ask any working person if they can make it on $10 an hour, if they can make ends meet, if they can find their way and stay in the middle class for $10 an hour. No, we need a $15 an hour minimum wage, and we need to adjust that wage for inflation so it keeps pace with the cost of living. We need to make our commitment to living wages for every worker. This is no time for timid. This is no time for same old, same old. This is no time to be ashamed of what we want Wisconsin to become. Because we won't reach that potential unless we are willing to make the people of Wisconsin a far better offer than they have been made for a very long time. We do need living wages for every worker, and we need health care for all. And we could create a public option for all the people in the state by changing just one word in state law. And if If the people of this state choose me as their governor, I will change that one word. And the Badger Care program will be there for all Badgers. We need debt-free, affordable education for everyone in this state. We cannot continue to bury young people under a mountain of debt. It has to be our state's commitment that education be as affordable for our kids and grandkids as it was for their parents and grandparents. That is not about asking for anything for free. I went to the University of Wisconsin. I wasn't asking for anything for free. I was willing to work my way through college, but I sure appreciated the commitment that past generations had made to make education so preposterously affordable that I could get out of 4 years of college with holy cow, it was $770 in student debt. Tuition was in the hundreds of dollars. I'm dating myself. I'm 57 years old, but I remember a time when tuition was still in the hundreds of dollars, and I wasn't asking for anything for free. I worked pea harvests during the summer, and Libby McNeil would let me work 80 or 90 hours a week on those pea harvests, and I saved up a heck of a lot of money doing that over the course of the summer, and I would hold down a part-time job during the school year, and I got out of college with less than $800 in debt. Now the average is $30,000, and I run into young people every day who have $50,000, $80,000, sometimes over $100,000 in student debt. What does that do to our economy? When will they be able to make a down payment on a home? When will they be able to buy a car? When they are trying to dig out under that mountain that has been piled on them. And what does that do to the realtors and the home builders and the car makers and the auto dealers when they can't go out there and make that down payment on a home or buy that car? Again, for decades now, we have been showering tax breaks and state subsidies on a few with the hope that some of what they are given would trickle down to the rest of us. It has never been more than a trickle. No, we need to do an about face and focus on empowering 5 million people in this state with those living wages, with health care for all, with debt-free education. And yes, we need to take high-speed internet to every doorstep in our state. Every household needs to have access to high-speed internet. Now, I grew up on a dairy farm in Clark County. I come from rural roots. I'm the one candidate in this race, the only candidate in this race, who was born and raised on a farm. And I know that over half of Americans still don't have access to high-speed internet if they live in the country. Over half of rural Americans do not have access to high-speed internet. How do you fully participate in a 21st century economy, or even fully participate in modern American life if you do not have that basic tool? We need to bring that 21st century tool to our entire population. That's how we spend $3 billion. That's how we invest in the empowerment of regular people. And we have to, as a state, make a commitment that Wisconsin will become the first state in the nation to be fully powered by renewable energy. You know some state is going to get there. I can't tell you what year it will be. I can't tell you how long it will be before it happens, but you know some state will eventually become first, and it should be Wisconsin. But we will not get there unless we start seriously competing in the race to become that state. And we're not even making a half-hearted attempt at the current time. And yes, we should have taken that $800 million to begin to build the high-speed rail system that we should have. And it was a crying shame and a horrible tragedy for our state that we turned away that money. And look, we all pay our federal taxes. We send our money to Washington. We didn't get a federal tax cut because we turned down the $800 million. That money just went to some other state so they could get ahead of us. That's a crying shame. That is borderline criminal, and that has to stop. And then we cannot become the state that we have the potential to be so long as we have budget priorities that lead more of our state budget money going to prisons than to colleges. We spend more on locking people up than on creating a path to the American dream. We are paying more and more for failure, and as a result are investing less and less in success. And that has to stop, but I don't know how we stop that, and I don't know how we flip those budget priorities unless we deal with the fundamental injustice of our drug laws and our criminal justice system. I am for the full legalization of marijuana. And that is important. That is important because our current laws are the driving force behind mass incarceration. They are the reason why we have a state budget that spends more on prisons than on colleges. I was in Milwaukee just the other day, and I told the people there about 2 zip codes that they know very well. But I will tell you about those zip codes as well. One is 53206, which is inner city Milwaukee. That zip code is the zip code where more people are incarcerated than in any zip code in America. More people are in prison in 53206 than anywhere else in America. And 53217 happens to be the zip code, and I know this because of all the decades I spent exposing big money in politics, shining light on those transactions between wealthy donors and elected officials. Because I spent all that time tracking money, I happen to know that 53217 is the zip code that produces more political donations than any zip code in the state of Wisconsin. There are drugs sold and drugs used in both zip codes, but people only go to jail for using them in one. That fundamental injustice has to be addressed. And unless we address that fundamental justice and the failure, the human failure of our policies, we cannot change that budget reality where we are spending more to imprison than to educate. We have to make that better offer to the people of Wisconsin. We all have to make that better offer to our neighbors and our friends and our co-workers and our other acquaintances. We need to talk not about what's wrong with Scott Walker or Donald Trump, but what Wisconsin has the potential to be and how we reach that potential. We will not beat Scott Walker with money. If you are looking for your Goliath in this race, I just would give you a friendly reminder that it was David who beat Goliath. It was David who brought down the giant. We will not beat Scott Walker with money, and that's been proven in 3 elections already. In the last one, $33 million was spent by the Democrats to try to bring down Scott Walker, and he won with a virtually identical percentage of the vote that he did the previous time when $22 million was spent against him. And he got virtually the same percentage of the vote in that election as he did in the first election for governor that he won when $12 million was thrown at him. Money will not beat Scott Walker. And telling people what is wrong with Scott Walker will not beat Scott Walker. We have to tell people what we are for, not just what we're against. We have to tell people what we believe Wisconsin has the potential to become, not just how we feel Scott Walker has run our state into the ground. We have to be for something compelling and inspiring, not just against the current arrangement and the current people who are in charge at the Capitol. When you think about real leadership that has changed America, when you think about the kind of leadership that changed America in the past, I trust that no one in this room would dispute that Martin Luther King provided leadership that changed America. I remind you, Martin Luther King gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. He gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have an alternative budget speech. We have to also be unashamed and willing to dream and to imagine what this state has the potential to become and how we reach that potential. And finally, here's the biggest challenge of all in my view, and the biggest key to winning this election. The greatest president ever produced by the Democratic Party. The greatest president ever produced by the Democratic Party once said that the forces of organized money are unanimous in their hatred for me, and I welcome their hatred. That defiance, that spirit of defiance against the royalty of our society in the days of the Great Depression. When Franklin Roosevelt said those words, America had descended into the depths of the Great Depression, and here we are today facing economic inequality at its highest level we have seen since the Great Depression. And that spirit that Franklin Roosevelt spoke to, that defiance of the forces of organized money arrayed against him at that time, has been conspicuously missing for too long in our state and in our country. If we are going to become the kind of place we have the ability to be, we are going to have to summon the courage to stand as Franklin Roosevelt did, with braces on his legs. If he could stand, if he could take that stand against those forces with braces on his legs, you all can stand now. You all can stand. Get up off your feet, people. Don't leave me standing here alone. We have more power than we know. We have more power than we have been told. We have the ability to make Wisconsin what we want it to be. We can do this. Thank you.